You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Sometimes in my sleep, Kevin, I just say that intro. I'm like muttering it to myself.
No, but you know what? I was thinking about the same type of thing. I was listening to the intro. I'm like, oh, Schweinsteiger. All right, we're getting him next week. He's training in Mallorca right now in Spain. Might be available for against Montreal Impact. I doubt it, but we'll see. But as well, you hear in that intro all the leagues we talk about, and there's one league that we've been talking about. Well, it's not really a league yet. It might be, and it's not in that intro. And I think I'm gonna have to call my voiceover guy and next year have the intro changed to include maybe the Canadian Premier League in that league talk segment.
Yeah, that might confuse the guy, but the Canadian Premier League.
Canadian Premier League? What?
Where does that one even fit? There you go. Yeah, some news the other day. It's actually offline now, which I suspect that the Halifax Regional Council got a polite phone call from the CSA asking them to remove a document that was put up to prepare the people that are on their council, I guess, or the public, to read this document, which gave some pretty juicy details about the proposed Canadian Premier League in a way that
having those documents read. You know, the governments and municipal council always put the addendum and the agenda and various of their sessions online. Nobody usually read them unless it's sports related. Usually it has to do with infrastructures or something like that, and then us, the bubble, get a hold to it, and we spread it to the world.
Yeah, and if the very first piece of information that's sort of outside of my reporting and Anthony's and people's like that, the very first sort of mainstream report that came from a similar document from Hamilton, where they found something that sort of tied into the Tiger Cats and what they were doing with the new stadium, and there was a mention of it directly. That was about a year and a half or so ago. So this isn't new, that this is how this stuff comes out. But there were some details in this document, so that I'll go through them real quickly here, the ones that are relevant. First off, it did list an announcement date, and that announcement date was May 2017. So that is when the document said that things would be officially announced. It said that Halifax, and this was a Halifax document to be clear, would be announced as a Canadian Premier League team in May 2017, which suggests to me that would be when all of the teams are announced. The other interesting part of this that a lot of people grabbed a hold of is they listed the 6 cities. They were mostly what we thought, with a couple exceptions, and one major exception, and that would be that Edmonton was included, Regina was not. We've all gone through the process thinking Regina was in there. We've never been able to find much information out about that. Maybe the reason we're not finding that is because, well, it's not there. The other piece of information that I had, it did in fact confirm that Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto, the 3 MLS markets, were not included. I have heard a lot of rumblings here that their suburban Toronto team, probably in Vaughan, is very much on the go, very much in play, but at least for an initial, the original 6, as they labeled them on there, which is kind of funny. If you don't follow hockey, you might not know that term, but
that's hilarious. They're going with that. That's hilarious. Have the original 6 and then have the expansion crew, like the expansion batch after, like in 72.
Yep, there you go. So there you go. So the idea, based on what I am getting out of this, would be that you would start with these original 6 teams, and then you would play a season. It looks like it would be a half season to start, because the launch date, and this one is what I found very intriguing, the launch date for the league proper was August 2018 listed. one of two things. Either they're insane and going to try and do a winter schedule, which I don't think they're insane. Edmonton in December or in January?
You
No,
think
I
it
don't
was
think so.
a problem in the MLS Cup in Toronto in December last year? Wait until it's in Edmonton. Then you're really talking about a problem for playing outdoors. Like it's going to have to be a dome situation or something.
Yeah, there's no way. So what it probably is, if you're talking about 6 teams and you're looking to just get the league up and running, and then maybe bring another 2 or 3 teams in or 4 teams in or whatever for season 2, which I suspect would start in April or May the next year, and would just sort of kind of sprint season to get it going and get it moving, which would be kind of fun. But you do the math in your head and you look at the calendar and you say they start the first week of August and they play 6 teams in the league. So what, you play every team 3 times, I guess. That would be 15 games over 15 weeks. Maybe you do top 4 in a playoff situation, which 4 of 6 teams making the playoffs, but still, you can bet that there would be a playoff in this league.
Yeah, you think
then
so?
You would go for 2 weeks of that, and you're looking at a 17-week season, which would end in the middle of November.
Yeah, we'll have a playoff. It's interesting though, right? Will this league have a playoff system? We don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, it's in North America. We're used to it, but I don't know. Should it have one? Maybe it'll be interesting to have a Premier League with no playoff. I don't know. I'm just an idea here. I'm playing devil's advocate. So should the Canadian Premier League have a playoff system? Let us know on Twitter if you think that they should at Soccer Today SPN.
Yeah, look, that debate is one of those ones that flares up all the time in these circles. People think that it's a pure champion. We've talked about this when it comes to the Supporters Shield all the time. I'm an advocate for a playoff system because we are in North America. That is how North American sports are set up. I don't buy into this argument that somehow a playoff champion is a less relevant, less whatever champion than a regular season and a round robin champion. I don't buy in that. I don't even agree necessarily with that idea that the team wins the regular season is better. I think that there's as much luck that goes into winning a round robin as there goes into winning a playoff. I think they're just different skill sets. So I do think that you need that game that allows you to market it around a championship game, something that you can play up. You look at in Canada, you look at the Grey Cup, for instance, and even though the CFL struggles at times in certainly the big markets, it still will get a huge number every year. It still is something that brings a lot of people together, and I think that having a similar thing for the Canadian Premier League would be very, very valuable, especially against Voyageurs earn their name. They well earn their name. They'd like to travel. I could see Voyageurs traveling annually to this game just to see. That's something again that would be greatly valuable for the league.
Just
Kevin,
quickly, Duane, you mentioned the Voyageurs. The tickets for the game in Montreal are going on sale very soon. If you are part of the mailing list of Canadian Soccer Association, you received an email yesterday to get ready to get some tickets to go see the Canadian men's national team play in Montreal for the first time since 2010, I believe.
Yeah, I'm trying. They played Honduras, I believe 2010. That sounds right. Yeah, I was at a game at Saputo in 2008 and 9, I think.
Yeah, like
anyway,
a mini Saputo, the first one, because it evolved since then. But yeah, mini Saputo.
Yeah. Oh, that. Yeah, the first Saputo. Well, there's also that game going way back. That was a World Cup qualifier, and the turf was lifting. Like it was terrible. It was like ripping up, and it was the field was awful that day. And I think that they did some repairs to it immediately after. The stadium was fairly new when I watched that game.
I think there's been like 8 different set of that field since then. Just 3 years ago, I remember during the season they changed it when there was some issues earlier on. Now the field in Montreal has never been an issue for the last few years in MLS, and actually looks very good now. We're talking about high quality, high caliber pitches, Montreal, Toronto included as well. Let's face it, they did a great job last year with the turnaround in the playoffs. And yeah, there was some smoke and mirrors, and there was some paint used to make sure that it looks better than it might have been, but it wasn't an issue for MLS Cup. And I think the groundskeeper crew in Canada not necessarily have an easy job, especially this time around when you have a game in Montreal coming up. But this summer, it won't be an issue at all, and hasn't been an issue over the last few years. The pitch looks amazing now. majority of the places in the Major League Soccer. But Canadian national team in Montreal, get your ticket. But going back to the CPL, Duane, let's sum it up. So what have we learned in that article?
I think that, well, yeah, I didn't mention the 6 cities, but I'll list them off here. Halifax obviously was included in this one, and this is the one that sort of, I wouldn't say coming to left field, but has sort of evolved recently as being one that we didn't necessarily expect when we were talking about this a year or so ago, that has now sort of evolved into the point that it looks like it's going to be part of the launch. There was a team in Ottawa, a team in Hamilton. Those are the 3 Eastern teams. And you have teams and Winnipeg. So Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg. They're mostly, if you look at those ownership groups outside of the Halifax one, and I'm still not entirely clear who's owning that one, but certainly the scale that is in there as well. That's another thing I should mention too. The stadium proposal itself is quite interesting, and we talked about this the other day when we talked about that Arizona team in USL. The same concept. They're looking to put a pop-up stadium for 3 years and then be able to renew it after that. So they're not looking to build a permanent structure. They're looking to build something that would fit around 3,000 to 5,000 seats, which might be a little smaller than some people like, but that's the scale that they're looking at, and they're looking at something that would work for the Maritimes. They're obviously including rugby in this as well, so they have to have some kind of multiple use, and I suspect that's what you'd see. The other thing, and Steven Sandor was mentioning this on Twitter the other day, is that he does not believe, and he believes very strongly, this is possible, that there is another group in Edmonton that would be stepping up and trying to get into that market. And I've been saying that for a while, that you wouldn't necessarily, just because the Eddies aren't going, you don't necessarily need to believe that they're in Edmonton. You can team market, and it's a bit Oklahoma City in NASL sounding when you think about it, but if that's what they do, I guess that's what they do.
Yeah, that's very interesting. All right, we'll take a quick break. I'll call Duane back. We have a little connection issue. We'll be back, and in the second block, we'll take a look at the different topics that happened since yesterday. But Duane, a big team in England is trying to make their main target against a big rival.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back. So you were saying before the break, Kevin.
Yep, I was just saying Chelsea wants to make Alexis Sanchez their main target. We're all aware of what happened over the last few weeks. First of all, Arsenal are terrible in the last few weeks. But the whole Sanchez saga and the dust-up with Wenger apparently, or an assistant, and things are not going well. He might be looking for a way out, and Chelsea might be willing to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, and the Wenger issues over the last little while, we talked at length about it a week or so ago. The international break has sort of taken some of the momentum out of that story. But the last I've been reading is that he's, now hinting that he's going to stay, and the Arsenal board will let him stay. So that's going to create some more discontent there, and we'll have to see how that plays out the rest of the year. It's going to be very interesting. Arsenal, of course, in the semifinals of the FA Cup, if they were to win that competition, it becomes even increasingly more difficult to part ways with the manager. It is a trophy. It is a major trophy. And if they win it, then he can make the argument that they're winning. Now, it does speak, I think, to the value of the FA Cup in people's minds right now, that it no longer seems to be enough to keep you around, especially if you can't win in the league. But nonetheless, that is something to watch for down the line. Kevin, look, the international breaks, they drive me nuts. They're so long. They're too long, and I don't know what the answer is, because they really just kill the momentum of league seasons. And as a guy that primarily watches club football now, which is, maybe not what I was in the past, and I think that the international game is a great gateway for a lot of people in this part of the world, but when you get into the club side of things, it tends to take most of your attention.
And let's face it, we're Canadian, so we don't get to watch our country participate at the highest level in those international breaks usually.
Yeah, well, and the good thing for us in Toronto here, or us in any, is that we have our home opener for the FC on Friday. So it would have been really difficult, Kevin, for us to have to go out twice in 1 week and do what we would do at a World Cup qualifier tonight. So it's good for our livers and our overall health that Canada failed to qualify for the Hex, I think, because it might have killed some Torontonian voyageurs this week otherwise. So that is me looking at things on the positive side there. But nonetheless, no, there is, of course, a big qualifier tonight for the U.S. in Panama. What are you thinking on that one heading into it, Kevin? Do you think the U.S. Off that 6-0 win, do you think that they can get it done again?
It's not a must-win game, but I believe it's a must-result game. You need to at least take a point in Panama. You need to make sure that 6-0 victory against Honduras last week isn't a fluke, because you have to continue the progress. You have to make sure that Pulisic, Dempsey, the chemistry that they have seemed to found over the last 10 days or so of being together this time around in this break, you have to continue that. And in this setting, Panama, hostile environment, not an easy team, an up-and-coming top 5 country in CONCACAF. If they're not there, they're almost there. And it's not a team that's going to lay down. They're going to feel they have all the tools necessary to give the U.S. a run for their money. And seeing not the last game, but the games before, Panama will salivate thinking about the opportunity that they can win. And with a youngish team for the U.S. men's national team in that setting, in the hostile environment, will we see the same type of performance by Pulisic like last week? I think so. But you still need to see it in reality, in execution, in an hostile environment. So Panama will feel they have what it is necessary to get the job done, but the U.S. will want to ride that 6-0 wave.
Yeah, the other side of this one, and they joked about it in the Bruce Arena interviews that came after, but I do wonder whether it is a factor, and that is, of course, if you remember how the last World Cup qualifying campaign ended with the U.S. scoring that late goal to propel Mexico into the World Cup at the expense of Panama, to the devastation of Panama, who have never qualified for a World Cup, whether or not that's not in the back of the Panama players' minds. I certainly think it's going to be back in the back of the Panama fans' minds, because there was no need for the U.S. to score that goal, right? I mean, other than like the competitiveness of nature of players to go out and try and put the knife to it. But there's some might view that, particularly in Central America, as being, there should have been kind of an unwritten code. They might think that the U.S. probably should have just let things slide so that Mexico could be eliminated to everyone's benefit in the region. I think we all would have kind of enjoyed, unless we're Mexican, we kind of would have enjoyed seeing Mexico go out of a World Cup before they got there.
I agree with you. And I haven't been on Twitter since last night, but Panama, I remember with Canadian men's national team a few cycles ago when they were in Panama, the noise made by the fan, they actually broadcasted the location of the hotel of the national team on the radio the day before. And at like 2, 3 a.m., big party, fireworks, music live outside the hotel by like thousands of fans. No way anybody slept in that hotel. And those type of environment are probably what the U.S. men's national team experienced last night. I haven't, like I said, I wasn't on social media, as usually some of those videos pop up and you get to see how the Panamanian are welcoming or not welcoming properly the opposing team.
Yeah, if you search Rudy Schuler's name on YouTube, you'll find a video that he posted. He was in Panama City for that game that Kevin just referred to. And as you said, it was a street party that happened immediately outside the hotel, which, ethically speaking, I found it a little bit absurd that the FA could, Panamanian FA could just say where to go to bother the Canadian players. It's not particularly sporting, but
fire alarms were pulled in the hotel rooms. That's a classic too. Where you pull the fire alarm and the hotel has to evacuate, so everybody has to wake up, and not just wake up, but wake up, get out of bed, disrupt sleeping patterns. And this is something when you just come back from traveling, when you're trying to recover, literally having your body's in recovery mode after a travel flight. So it's all hostile. That what makes CONCACAF different though than a lot of federation in the world, like because of those gamesmanship that have been accepted over the last many decades and actually been part of what CONCACAF almost feels is CONCACAF is those things that, well, ethically it's kind of not okay, but we all embrace it because it's part of the culture.
Yeah, well, yeah. I believe that the last time down, if memory serves, that they ended up booking, like after they learned that lesson, they ended up booking 2 hotels and, having a dummy bus go to one of the hotels and then try and sneak another one off to the one that they were actually at. Like, I mean, they do crazy stuff like that to try and avoid this. It's a bit absurd, but that's, the nature of the beast in CONCACAF. And it's why, people that kind of look down their nose at the CONCACAF qualifying process that aren't familiar with the region don't realize how tough it can be to get out of, because you have to go into those environments and you have to deal with safety issues that you just wouldn't in UEFA or other confederations that are a little bit more shall we say mainstream, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, but it's certainly something the U.S. will have to deal with, and it certainly will be a party in there. In Panama, the flip side of you saying that it's a must-result game for the U.S., I think Panama would look at this as an opportunity that if they do get the win, then it really does put pressure on one of the big bodies in the region and certainly helps them out a great deal as well. I saw some stats, like some breakdown numbers on what the percentage possibility of qualifying was with each result, and I'm off the top of my head, it was about 83% the U.S. would qualify for the World Cup if they got the win in Panama. I believe that the draw was something like 65 or 70%. It was still pretty high, and the loss was about 50-50. So U.S. doesn't want to lose this. They're not out of it if they lose, but you don't want to go 50-50, not this far into the hacks.
Not just that, if they lose, Duane, 6-0 anymore. We're talking about they're still in trouble, and the 6-0 was the outlier in the hex so far. If they get that result or even a win, then you're starting to think about, okay, it was just a flub at the beginning, and now they're going in the right direction. So it's kind of a big game to establish where the direction is going, right? Because what is direction? It's not just one thing. It's not just one point. It's a line. It's going somewhere, and you need more than one point to actually establish a direction.
Yeah, precisely. And look, as I said last week before the 6-0 game, I did not have a lot of concern about the U.S. I don't have any concern about the U.S. qualifying or not. I'm a neutral when it comes to but what I mean by that is it's just logically speaking, I thought that it was a bit far-fetched when you look at their record, and it was a bit stressful, I'm sure, for American fans who aren't used to being on the bottom of a table. But nonetheless, they had played, again, 2 of their 3 hardest games already. Right now, with 3 games played, they have, with that win, jumped over Honduras and TNT and now do sit in the playoff position. That is how easy this, not easy, but how forgiving this kind of qualification process can be. Panama on 4 points, a point ahead of the U.S. They would want to drive that in. And if they hit 7, then you would have to think that their chances look very, very good to at least claim that 4th spot, if not above. TNT with only the 3 points so far, and Honduras, I think it's a weak Honduras team. God help us what that means for Canada, but I do think it is a weaker Honduras team right now, and the 6-0 certainly, demonstrated that to a certain amount. So the idea the U.S. can't get top 4 is, I wouldn't say far-fetched, but certainly even with a loss tonight, I would still like their chances to finish above those 2 teams based on the results we've seen so far.
No, I agree. I want to change the subject for a few minutes, Duane. I want to go back to Minnesota for a second. Interesting article that Agent Heath in a conversation, and then you can read this on MLSsoccer.com from yesterday. He's talking about we need to take a serious look in the mirror. Really? Wow. Really, Captain Obvious. Thanks. No, without being disrespectful. It is here interesting where he's like, we need either a change of formation, maybe personnel. Maybe we need to rethink everything we're doing from here, the summer window. They finished the game in a 3-5-2 type of formation, but really defensively, conservatively, and they only allowed 1 goal. So that's the one positive when they made that formation change. Do they need to go back to that? Do they need better players? We've talked about the 17 players only on the team sheet for Minnesota. in their last game this weekend. That's because to international duty, they had 9 players mixed with injuries, international duty. So it is a lot of players on the injury list or traveling or playing for their country. But still, that's when you need your young players, your academy players and stuff like that, and be an expansion team. Those are not easier to have. So a lot of things that need to be rethink, and the defense, like Adrian you've mentioned, need to take a serious hard look in the mirror. And this needs to fuel the defenders. This needs to fuel the team to do everything as one. 11 defending, and the amount of goals conceded, which is a record, by the way, for an expansion team, for any team. It's the most goal conceded by a team in 4-game stretch ever in this league, never mind the expansion team. So this has to fuel the players to make a stop.
Yeah, it's the most goals conceded in a 6-game stretch of all time, and
they only played 4.
Yeah,
ouch! That actually hurts.
Yeah, it's absurd. Like it's the theater of the absurd. Like you don't allow 5 goals in a soccer game, multiple games in a row, unless you're just not playing at the same level. And there's obviously major problems there. The concern obviously would be, they have scored some goals this year, and I think that's led some people to say, okay, well, if they can score goals, then maybe they can compete. But if you start to shell back and you still score the goals, right, you have to open up as much as they are. And I do think that there is probably something to be said with the teams that they're playing losing some of their intensity too, which is probably contributing, to that second half goal against New England. Maybe, New England's like, whatever, let's just try and score. Let's go out and have some fun. We're not going to defend as hard as we would normally because we can score on this team. And sure enough, that ends up resulting in you allowing. But
for New England to look like Barcelona, there's a lot of things that goes wrong in Minnesota's side.
Yeah, look, and I know that the Minnesota guys will point to the idea that their NASL players that they brought up aren't really playing, so they say that can't be the problem. But it is the problem because it means you have no depth. It means that you brought the wrong type of players along so that you're forced to use guys that are woefully underperforming because the guys below them aren't good enough to push them. That is part of this problem, regardless of whether they're actually seeing minutes out there. Look, we're going to be talking about this team all year because this is a mess. And the only thing that they really can do, and Heath, I think, does have to lay some blame here, that he's got to recognize that this team just needs to figure out how to do nothing more than defend. I don't think it's realistic that you can get a clean sheet from this team, but maybe you can only allow 2, maybe, and that might allow you, like in the Colorado game, to nab a point here and there. But, when I did that poll on Twitter last week and I asked, well, how many points will they finish with? And 90% of the respondents said less than 20. That's like historically bad stuff. And, the worst expansion team of all time is 2005, 19 points. I think that it's probably realistic that that's about where they might be able to get to at their very best. At right now, I still think that under 10 is not crazy. It's not. Like, can they get a win this year? Is it possible that the team could go winless? I think it is with this team unless they make a serious fix in the window.
Yeah. Because otherwise the loon doesn't see the window and it's crashing really hard into it.
Yeah. And loons like to dive. They go below the surface to fish. So, I think that this loon is going to go way below the surface before it resurfaces up with a fish in its mouth anytime soon. And that was a bit of a stretch for an analogy. But we'll probably end the show here at this point today, Kevin.
Yeah, we can top that. I can top that. So.
Okay, there you go. I'll let you, as always, close out. Of course, we'll watch the U.S. Panama game with great interest tonight. Talk about that. D2 tomorrow. I'm going to hopefully have a Delta's guest on, someone who was at that opener to talk about that. But as always, Kevin, why don't you wrap the show up and say goodbye?
Yeah, and it was a record weekend for the USL. Over 53,000. I think it's over 58,000 actually. Fans across North America to watch USL games. And until tomorrow for Division 2 Wednesdays, for Duane Rollins, I am Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. And you can follow the show at Soccer Today SPN. Until tomorrow, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.